And we're live. We're live. Welcome, everybody, and welcome to another episode of our interviews on Apotheosis Live. Today, we have a very special guest, Bruce Cryer and Jeff Granville today. And Jeff is going to be introducing Bruce for us as we dive into a really important topic today on creativity and the power of healing. Jeff, go ahead.
All right. Hello, Geraldine, and welcome, Bruce, to our show. Bruce Cryer has had a diverse career spanning musical, theater, biotech, personal development, health and well-being, and executive mentoring. He began as a singer, dancer, actor in New York, including 2 years in The Fantastics, the world's longest-running musical. Since the early 1980s, Bruce has been teaching innovative approaches to optimal health, business success, personal balance, and human performance. Bruce has been adjunct faculty at Stanford University since 1997 and was named CEO of HeartMath in 2000. Having helped launch the HeartMath Institute with founder Doc Childrey in 1991. Bruce's clients include Mayo Clinic, Kaiser, George Washington University, Center for Excellence in Public Leadership, University of Delaware College of Health and Science, NASA, Unlivier, Cathay Pacific Airways, and NHS UK, and the World Bank, among many others. Bruce is co-author of the book From Chaos to Coherence, The Power to Change Performance, and the Harvard Business Review article on executive health, stress, and performance called Pull the Plug on Stress. He is a frequent contributor to books on health, performance, life transition, and spiritual transformation. A 2-year health crisis ending in 2011 convinced him to focus his energies on creativity and mentoring. Bruce now enjoys a robust health while singing, dancing, and enjoying photography. His keynote performance, What Makes Your Heart Sing, which I've taken, awakens the power of inspiration. His Renaissance mentoring program powerfully assists entrepreneurs and transformational leaders in diverse fields. In 2018, he released Renaissance Human, an album of original songs co-created with the Brothers Corin, and he performs regularly in New York. He is currently president of the Graduate Institute for Holistic Studies. There you go.
It sounds like I don't sleep. And,
I know.
It does, yeah.
How could you? And I know that's tip of the iceberg.
I just don't want to freeze on the entire iceberg. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for that, Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who wrote that, but it was like way too long. Thank you.
That was amazing. So let's jump right into it, Jeff. I'm so excited, Bruce, to get into some of these topics. First of all, let's start. How did you begin your journey in even? I know a bit of your story, but as you came in to get involved with projects like the Heart Math Institute, how did that journey begin?
We do have 90 minutes, right? So I'll take more than 30 seconds to begin that story. Thank you for asking, and thank you for hosting this, Geraldine. It's a delight to meet you. I look forward to this conversation.
My pleasure. Likewise.
Well, I consider myself extremely lucky because I was raised by two incredibly socially conscious people, my parents, who are also both very creative, although you wouldn't completely know that to look on the outside. My father was an executive with a life insurance company and commuted into Manhattan every day for 35 years. My mother ostensibly was a home economics teacher in a school district in New Jersey, and they looked kind of normal. And yet my mother was a remarkable artist in every conceivable medium. My father was an incredible gardener and a brilliant tenor, singer. And so there's a rich creative life of them, even though their day jobs, paid the bills and raised 5 sons. I'm the youngest of 5 boys. So I was raised, and both of my parents were pacifists during the Second World War. So basically, they had both come to the conclusion in their early 20s, at a time when the world was reeling from Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. They had concluded that war was inherently evil, and war would be the end of humanity if we didn't stop it and change our thinking. So two highly creative parents both very socially aware, very socially conscious about humanity. I grew up identifying less as an American and more as a global citizen. I wasn't anti-American, not at all, but I didn't limit myself. I felt like I'm part of the whole humanity because that's what this is about, isn't it? Isn't that what that's about? This is about.
Mhm.
So that's sort of the background, and I felt like a normal kid. I played sports in school. I was a good student. I was president of the student body my senior year in high school, and but I had this love for music also, and so I had this interest in music that evolved since I was about 8 years old. I played trumpet in the little school orchestra, but I got better and better as time went on. But meanwhile, this was the 60s. This was the foment and the cultural chaos and the political chaos of the 60s. And I think I was 15 years old, and myself and two older brothers all got on a bus to do a march on Washington against the war in Vietnam. And that same year, I think it was the same year or two when Martin Luther King was assassinated, Robert Kennedy was assassinated, Malcolm X was assassinated around that time. Cities across America were burning from all the conflict around civil rights. And so it was a time of enormous upheaval and at the same time this cultural awakening because of the Beatles and the Flower Children and the hippies and peace and love and all this was going on at the same time. You can tell I'm dating myself, but this is how I grew up. So very influenced by all these things. And as you mentioned in the bio, I kind of fell into musical theater, literally fell in. I did not ever, as a kid, want to be an actor or a singer or a dancer. It was sort of fun to see people in shows, but I had zero aspiration to ever be on stage except if I was going to play trumpet, which I wasn't ever going to do as a career, but it was sort of fun in school, right? And then somebody thought I maybe had some talent, and he started working with me, and he gave me the lead in the high school musical my senior year. And 2 years later, I was handed the leading role in the longest running musical in the world, which Jeff referred to in the bio, called The Fantastics. And I suddenly had found myself in this is about a 5 year period, immersing myself in the world of musical theater, finding I was actually quite a good singer, finding I could not only move pretty well because I was an athlete, but I could move like a dancer because I was sort of born to do that, it turned out, even though I didn't start till I was like 18 or 19. And so this kind of deep love of being able to do all these things that I never imagined I could do, sing, dance, act, do mime, do carnival stuff. I learned how to eat fire, learned how to lie on a bed of nails, all kinds of crazy skills, mime, all kinds of things that just sort of opened me up and opened me up. And the opening that was happening from the arts was paralleling an opening that was happening in me spiritually that kind of had already been underway because in the 60s when all the wars were happening and the assassinations were happening and the riots were happening and the students were coming alive and being voices for themselves, that was awakening in me too, as was a spiritual yearning. And I remember the same year I was marching in Washington against the war, I was reading Henry David Thoreau, one of the transcendentalist writers that one of the famous quotes of his from the 1850s was, "The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation." And I thought, wow, is that ever true? And so I was thinking that 100 years later. Now, 60 years later, I'm thinking, wow, is that ever true? And meanwhile, this author was quoting the Bhagavad Gita and quoting Hindu and yogic philosophy, and I'm thinking, this is an American guy who hung out at a pond, Walton Pond, to kind of get a spiritual awakening. But meanwhile, he's way into the culture of Asia, the culture of the Far East, of India in particular. So that opened up doors. I need to learn more about that. And anyhow, there are so many tributaries. There's so many pathways of what happened in my life, but um, this combination of the spiritual development with this love of singing and dance and entertaining people merged for a time in this career I had in New York City. But then after about 5 years, the urge to help the world, as I'd felt as a teenager, the urge to develop myself and grow personally as deeply and powerfully as I could began to outpace and overwhelm the interest in being on stage. It's kind of like, why be on stage entertaining people knowing that's a pretty short-lived experience? I'm not changing lives for long. I mean, I could have changed somebody's life for a while and maybe a long time. They could have had some awakening listening to a show or something. But let's be realistic. Entertainment is fantastic. I love it. I still love to sing, but I felt like there's more. And in those days, where did you go when you had those thoughts? California. And and still to a degree, although now the fires are getting kind of scary. But so I moved to California with my girlfriend and lived in the Santa Cruz Mountains, south of San Francisco, about an hour and a half, and became part of a university there that was a kind of a spiritual community and a university. It was interesting. And it was during that time that I met this man named Doc Childrey, and he is the man who later, 10 years after I met him, founded HeartMath. So I'll pause and before I shift into the next 40 years of my life. Oh my God, it's that many years. That's the first. That's kind of the first half what I just shared, and a little more than the first half. I'll just pause for a moment. I'll catch my breath if not everybody else.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you. What a beautiful story. What a powerful transformation and journey that you held. And what what does creativity mean to you? What does it mean to be able to express, to create, to embody that?
Well, I have to say that my appreciation for what creativity is has gone from I was really into it for many years, especially once I became an actor. I didn't think of myself as creative at all until then, but even when I became an actor and then singer and dancer and had all this schooling and very creative pursuits, I kind of was liking this creative thing, and somehow I still felt a bit of a distance between the idea of me being creative, even though I did all these creative things and was even paid for them. I still didn't quite think of myself as a creator. Um, what changed is after HeartMath began, which was in 1990, 1991, I was part of the founding group for those years. And around 20 years into it, I started getting sick, quite sick. And it ended up being cancer. And the surgery required treatment, which got me more infections. And I was having staph infections, and the staph got in my blood. And I had multiple life-threatening things going on at the same time. I survived it all. I'm 12 years cancer-free, 11 years staph infection-free, 10 years on titanium hips. So I had both hips replaced also. So all of this happened in a 2-year period. On top of that, my mother passed away. So it was a very sobering time. But in the aftermath of this, once I kind of got through the worst of it and realized I was going to survive it, I wasn't just, I rationalized, I sort of laughed at myself after going through all this stuff and said, I think I went through all the old age diseases early so I could kind of get them out of the way and now just live youthfully the rest of my life. So in the aftermath of this, it was around late 2011 into early 2012, this urge to sing again came very strong. It happened one night in a Christmas Carol sing-along concert with 2,000 church choir singers in the Washington D.C. area. I was visiting my brother in D.C. I'm sitting there, one of the carolers in this beautiful hall in the Kennedy Center, and it was a transcendent experience. I felt so magnificent just singing Christmas carols with people who loved that music and loved to do it, and their hearts were pouring into it, and as was mine. And as we left that theater after a 2 hour of joy and magnificent, absolutely magnificent music, a brilliant orchestra had created these interesting arrangements of such very familiar carols, but they were like, "What is this? Oh, it's the first Noel. Wow, this is totally different than the first Noel usually." So, and it was so exciting for me. I've been so bereft of rich cultural experiences living in the mountains for so many years as I had been doing. And that night, as I was leaving the theater, this voice, I don't get voices, this voice said to me, "Your voice needs to be heard again in the world. not just like singing, keep singing in the car, dude, or or to keep the shower singing going. No, it's like your voice needs to be heard in the world again. I thought, okay, message received. Thank you, whatever where that was coming from. And the next day, I called this dear friend of mine, brilliant composer, seven-time Emmy Award-winning composer. You may know him, Geraldine, being in the Bay Area, Gary Malkin. And I called Gary, and Gary and I were college roommates 40 years earlier. I called him, texted him first, and we decided to get together in a month and hang out for a weekend and just play music. Well, that led to we've got a thing here. This is a powerful. He's got incredible performance skills. 7 Emmys he's won for his movie scores and film scores, and won all kinds of other awards for commercials and film, documentaries, all sorts of things. And I was pretty good, had been, just hadn't done it in quite a while. So I was kind of getting my chops back, and we created this joint, what we call a keynote performance called "What Makes Your Heart Sing," which meant we were speaking on themes that were relevant that conferences would want to hire us to do, but now adding music to it. So bringing in live performance and getting the audience singing and getting audience members up on stage, and they were just like, "Wow, this is so cool!" But this is not just a concert. You're actually speaking on themes of depth and meaning and profound of a profound nature. And so, in this process of even just beginning to create a keynote performance, I was feeling in the most creative phase of my life in a way. I was no longer CEO of HeartMath. I had stepped down several months earlier. I was kind of free job wise. I mean, I was doing some consulting, but I didn't have a heavy commitment of work. And I was just surrendering to this idea that I needed to be creative again. I needed to do things that my soul was really missing the ability to sing and dance and do these kinds of creative things. And as I just kind of allowed myself to accept that I am fundamentally a creative person, like for the first time in my life, really, I was in my mid 50s or whatever, when I accepted, you are a creative person. You are, and actually, the secret is everybody is. Everybody's a fundamentally creative person. I had some obvious skills we call creative: singing, dancing, acting, photography, writing, etc. But I'm no more creative, but I was accepting that at my core, if I'm not expressing creatively, if I am not using that part of what I am made of, I am not whole. There's just no two ways around it. I cannot only do business as much as I enjoy business and mentoring others and creating businesses, and that's fun. But if it's not balanced with just singing my heart out or just dancing until all the stress is gone or just taking a photo, as Jeff has seen many of mine, because the sun coming through the golden leaves of fall it's so magnificent. I've got to like, oh my God, that's so gorgeous. I've got to take this and share it. I have to express all those sides of me because those are fundamentally who I am. So my relationship to creativity has gone wow in the last 10 years because it became apparent to me creative energy is what we're all made of. And if we tell ourselves we're not, and unfortunately parents often were the ones who told us we weren't, not mine. My parents were fine. You want to do creative stuff? Go for it, kid. We're behind you. Totally. I realized I was so lucky. I was so lucky I didn't have that. I had plenty of fear as it was, but not because of them. They were like right there supporting me. My father must have come 25 times at least to see me in the Fantastics. He'd just come backstage one night. I wouldn't even know he was coming. And somebody would say, "Oh, hi, Mr. Cryer." And look around, Dad? Well, hi. Hey, Dad, you seeing the show tonight? Again? Okay, great. Come on. So, so this is a very long answer to your question, but I'm trying to give people a sense of the journey because we all have our journeys and we all have side trips or periods that are incredibly challenging, as was that 2 year period for me. In the middle of all that, I kind of just touched on it. My mother passed away. That, for many people, that's the biggest part of the story, is my mother passed away. So there was so much going on, and being already a pretty self-reflective person, I kind of couldn't ignore all this stuff going on around me and just say, "Oh, I'm just sick for a while." Well, okay, I'm just really sick, like really, really sick for a while. I'll be over it, and then just kind of go back to before. And little by little, it was like, no, there is something also that is emerging out of this that I don't even know what it is yet. There's no plan, there's no strategy. That's not like, oh, my next move will be nothing. The next move was heal,
Mhm.
fully heal, get yourself back to full strength and full energy and full spirit and see what happens. And I didn't have any sense at that point that I would embark on as much of a creative adventure as what unfolded. It was not, it was completely unknown to me at that point. It was just like an inkling. I think I need to sing again.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible. And I want to go back to this point that you were just making about how we are made to create. What have you discovered in this journey, in your insight? How is it that we are designed to create? And what happens to the body when we don't express that creation that needs to come out?
Wow. Each of those questions is a book, but thank you for asking. Um, a few years after the health stuff ended, and I'd begun singing and dancing, and the project with Gary, What Makes Your Heart Sing, was happening, and we were doing it at conferences, and we got to do it in Italy twice, and it was very fun, and we recorded an album of guided meditations, Gary playing piano, me speaking and narrating some meditations. So it felt like a very rich, very creative time. And after a few years, people who had only known me as the heart math guy, or people who had only known me years before that as the musical theater guy and didn't know I'd kind of gotten it, that I was now teaching at Stanford and I was now writing for the Harvard Business Review and all this stuff. I started getting comments, and the phrase Renaissance man kept popping up. And people would say, wow, you're like a Renaissance man. You've had a Renaissance. You've kind of come back to life after all the health stuff. And now you're doing these things you hadn't done in years. That's so cool. Good on you, man. And I get comments like this, and it happened enough times. I had never in my life considered myself a Renaissance man. And now suddenly life is sort of giving me that mirror. And I thought, seems like seems like something has emerged here that I wasn't noticing. And then I pondered that a little bit more, and because in the traditional sense of Renaissance man, it's kind of like a polymath, someone that is skilled at multiple contrasting areas, like a banker who's also a concert violinist, or a real estate guy who's also a brilliant painter, or whatever it may be. And so that was sort of the obvious idea of it. But I kept sort of pondering this, and I thought at one point that the term Renaissance human came to me. And that was partly because when I was thinking of Renaissance man, I thought, well, the problem with that term, half the world's population is left out. And then someday, it's sort of out of the blue, Renaissance human, Renaissance human. That's a takeoff on Renaissance man, but it's something new. And I kept kind of pondering this, and this didn't all happen at once, but what emerged over time was thinking about, well, what does Renaissance literally mean? We think of Italy in the 16th century, or the Harlem Renaissance in the early 1900s, or where culture has suddenly changed. Literally, it means rebirth, to birth again. And I thought, well, what if at first it was a question, and then it became a, dude, you didn't even need to ask the question. This is just the way it is. You just need to kind of accept this. But it started as a question: what if the point of being human is to, throughout our life, continue to give birth to new parts of ourselves? We know that's true when we're young. When you're physically born, there's a lot that has to be born. You have popped out, but you're not ready. you know, there are not a lot of circuits in your brain yet, so you don't know how to. You can't see clearly. You can't stand up. You can't grasp things. There's all kinds of things that aren't formed yet because all the wiring is not hooked up, because you haven't lived in the real world yet enough. So you're growing. You're growing into all kinds of things, and that's really obvious when we're young. And then puberty happens, and whoa, what the is that going on? And it's kind of scary and weird and really nice, and all that's going on. So you're birthing a whole nother aspect of you had no idea was going to happen. And then other things, other influences could happen, like a course that suddenly gets us fascinated with Italian history, and we want to learn that, and suddenly we become an expert in that, and had no idea as a kid that we would ever turn into that. So that's an example of a new birth. Or we meet someone and they just excite us about something and we want to become an athlete, or whatever it could be. We give birth. But then I believe that as humanity, I think this is not unique to Western culture. I think this is true in most cultures. Um, we kind of hit a point where we feel like, well, that part's over. The learning time is over. Now we're an adult. Now we have responsibilities like a family, if we have that. We have to have a job that will continue to support us and continue to provide security and safety for those we care about. And that requires stability. So you don't need to keep on growing. Because if you keep on growing, that sounds unstable. That sounds like the security I'm trying to create is going to be challenged. And so, God forbid, when we hit our 40s or 50s and we start to question this life we've created for ourselves, which is maybe probably lacking in growth, lacking in new learning, and we start to think, I have this urge to do something else. We're criticized for this. We're called, oh, midlife crisis. Bruce is doing an album. Okay, that like he's good enough to do an album. I think it sounds like reliving his high school days or something, and we shut down the urge of people. And so I think that's an unfortunate fact of our society, is that we don't acknowledge that life, the human experience, in my opinion, is about continuing to birth new parts of ourselves, continuing to birth new parts of ourselves. And why would that stop? Why would we say to ourselves, I mean, I'm not saying you got to be reading books all the time or studying courses all the time. I don't mean that. I mean the ability to stop when you walk outside and learn from that moment of beauty and be transformed by that moment of beauty. That's ongoing learning too. When I step outside thinking I'm just going to do a walking meditation and it turns into a walking photo shoot because the light is coming through the golden trees so profoundly, I got to be in that moment. I got to do that. So creativity has become this living experience for me now. And I completely believe that all humans, we are designed to create life. We have the power to create another life. The energy to create is designed into our DNA, let alone the collective psyche since time began. Create, we have to create, we have to create. And I've taken it to the level of, you can probably figure out I am not speaking from a script. Yes, the questions you're asking me are things I've been asked before in some form or fashion, so it's not unfamiliar to me. But how I'm talking about it is absolutely new. I've never done this with Jeff before. I've never met you before. It's different for those reasons. I am creating, not because I'm special. It's what we all do. This is a creative moment. And I'm trying to say to everybody, we're all creating all the time, unless we're completely unconscious, unless we're just working from a script in our life. If we're working from a script, then we're probably not creating as much. But if we're really conscious of the conversation we want to have, conscious of the fact that every moment is an opportunity to build relationship or undermine it, then we're actually creating all the time. So why not learn how to harness that? Because that's what we're made of. That's the amazing thing about being human to me, is that we are made of it, and it doesn't have to stop. It's only our mindsets and the hand-me-down programs of previous generations that convince us you should stop, or you should put all of that creative stuff off until you retire, at which point you're so tired and so burned out and overwhelmed, you have very little energy to even do that. Well, that doesn't sound like a good plan either. So I'm just saying, why would you not do it? Why would you not put every ounce of your energy into developing all of you, which of course has to include the creative part? But I'm not creative. I know that's what people keep telling themselves. I hope you will believe me that you really are. You really are.
Yeah, beautiful, Bruce, and you're an inspiration and an example for that. And like I said about your Creativity Unleashed class, you're absolutely contagious. The energy you have, positive contagion, is effective to everybody you work with, and you are speaking from your heart. You're in a flow state, and you have that balance of coherence and integration, which is what I call biohacking the physiology of our divinity, right? When you're vertically in coherence, and you're laterally integrated in your both your brains. So I want to go back, as uplifting as this creativity part is, I want to go back, if you would, into your heart math days and talk about how, focusing on the science and coming off to the world as scientific kind of led you away from your creative side and got you unbalanced, and led to what happens to us when we don't create, when we are left brain dominant in a working world. And I know it's a personal part of your journey, but I would enjoy sharing it with everybody.
That's a great question, Jeff. I appreciate it. And I do want to clarify that I don't blame the science of heart math for kind of taking me off. One of the things that I actually loved about, and still love about heart math, because I still teach it regularly,
Absolutely.
is the scientific, the grounding, because there's lots of systems of personal development that are beautiful in terms of a philosophy or a spiritual aspiration, but they often lack grounding and in validation that what you're doing is having an effect that can actually change you in a sustainable way. And heart math determined from day one, and that's part of why I bought in from day one, that we were going to use mainstream science to try to validate spiritual concepts instead of just letting them kind of stay up in the clouds, bring them down to the street and put them in the lab, but not to put them in just the alternative energy lab, put it in the mainstream science lab to be able to talk the language that mainstream scientists could respect, because that's why I've been working at Stanford for 25 years, teaching. That's why I've worked at Kaiser Permanente for years. NASA, highly scientifically oriented places, embraced heart math because there was a strong scientific foundation. But I think for me, so the science was definitely a huge asset and something that I loved and was very good at explaining, even though I'm a non-scientist. But I think, like so many people, that I had a very deep sense that I was a heart-based person and wanted to be that for my life, and that was my mission. And at the same time, you can get caught up in different identities, and the running of an organization, even though it was certainly not just on my shoulders. The CEO title kind of makes it sound like, wow, it's all on you. Well, we were a team, no question. There was a whole team of people, and very capable people, very talented people, most of whom are still there. And but I think there was just a point where I was so involved in trying to communicate in very left brain ways to be able to be credible at Stanford, to be able to be credible to World Bank or at Unilever or at Shell Oil in London, or the various places that I have worked and taught over the, or NASA. You're talking about very high level engineers in the room that you're teaching, right? And they don't suffer fools. You've got to be able to be very credible scientifically. And I think to some degree I did pay a price. Not nobody forced me to pay that price, but I think to try to have that credibility and give people confidence that what I was teaching them really had validity, that I hid certain parts of myself to some degree. And that became more obvious to me after I was sick and after facing a couple of life-threatening conditions where it's kind of like, okay, I got past that one. Okay, I got past that one. I'm clearly operating on a second chance now, or maybe a third chance. I need to make the most of it. And part of that means I'm not going to care as much anymore about how I come across. I'm not going to care as much and overcare as much, because I know there's a truth that I am in touch with for me. And a lot of people will see that and resonate with that. Those who don't, it's really okay. It's like so okay. I honor you and respect you for saying in your truth if it doesn't resonate with mine. That's like so okay. So I'm more okay than I ever was before. And so that's allowed me to just feel freer in a way that I wasn't as much. And keeping in mind, my position, I was CEO. I was very visible in a public setting, large conferences, media appearances, all kinds of things. So there was that extra kind of responsibility of I'm one of the key heart math people too. So there was a certain responsibility that once I stepped away from that job, I can just not have to have that, and I can just see where do I need to explore, and then life made it easy. The Christmas Carol concert when my brother asked me if when my flight was arriving, was I going to get there in time to go with him and his wife to the concert? My first reaction was, I've sung enough Christmas carols. Thank you, Dan. No, it's okay. I don't need to go. And then he said, "Oh no, it's gonna be fun." I said, "Wait a minute. Why are you saying no? You're in this whole new phase of your life. Who knows what'll happen? Just go for it. Have fun." I went. It changed my life. It totally changed my life that night. To, how it started, 2,000 people, all church choir singers from Washington, D.C. area, hundreds of professional choir singers on stage, chamber orchestra, magnificent. After about 30 minutes of the event, the audience is invited to finally sing along with the choir and the orchestra, which was like, when do we get to do it? When we like little puppies, when do we get to sing too? And we were invited to stand and sing "Joy to the World," which is it was the great one to be the first one because there was a lot of relief. Oh, we get to sing, and it's "Joy to the World," joy to the world. It's just so joyful. So I'm singing my heart out with 2,000 other people singing and an orchestra and hundreds of people on stage. And it was so loud, you could barely hear anything, and I could barely hear myself. And at the end of it, we started to sit down, and the lady standing in front of me and the lady to my left both turned to me and said, "Who are you? Your voice is amazing. Wow." My reaction was, "How could you tell? How I couldn't hear me. How could you hear me?" And later, the woman to my left said, um, "Our church, we would love to invite you to sing at our church next week." I said, "Oh my God, how sweet. I live in San Francisco. It's a little bit too far. I can't come back. I'll be leaving." But the universe was showing me, dude, random people are telling you you need to sing. And it didn't feel random after that. Actually, it was like that was a setup. It was a total setup from my soul to make it really obvious you're supposed to sing again. So when the voice kind of came in, whatever that voice was, my higher self, God, whatever, it was like, okay, got it. Amazing night. I could definitely do with more of this. No problem at all. This does not feel like a job to have to be singing again. So I don't know if I fully answered your question, but I think it was just been a journey where kind of recognizing that nobody had prevented me from performing or using my creativity. I think in the context of the 20 years that I was so involved in the leadership of HeartMath, the early years were incredibly creative for all of us because we were literally building buildings, literally building programs, literally building organizations, literally building teams, literally building lives as a unit of 30 of us who were all coming together, many for the first time. So it was a lot of creation, and that happened for years. And I was involved the first couple of generations of the HeartMath website. I was the designer. Within a couple of years, it became clear, oh, we actually have people who are talented in that job that would be actually better than you, Bruce. But there were so many things that were possible to be very involved in the actual creation of for the first 10 years. And we had a band. HeartMath had a band for the first 10 years as well. And we were damn good. 6 of us in the original staff of HeartMath had all had professional careers either on stage in New York or in professional bands and even had been done recording. 6 of us out of the original staff. And we were a damn good band. And so part of the experience of coming to HeartMath was, is the band going to play? Is the band going to play? And we'd say, yeah, we can do a set tonight. And then people would be like, who are you people? You've got all of the band, all of those people that just did that amazing song. You all work here. Like, do people have to audition to work at HeartMath? We say, yes, actually, you have to at least be able to have rhythm. If you can't sing, no problem, but at least you got to be able to move a little bit too. So it was a rich time, but then as time went on, we had to hire more people. It couldn't just be the original team. I was sort of kicked upstairs in a way, more and more management, less and less hands-on. And so the amount of creative activity I was doing was going down. The band, for a variety of reasons, stopped playing. So a lot of the more creative things I'd had in the first 10 years, little by little, were kind of evaporating. And I didn't realize how much I missed it until the opportunity to do a little bit of it again emerged. And then it was like, I can't get enough of this. This is amazing. Yes, I need to do this. for sure.
Wow. Bruce, I know that you worked so hard to healing yourself from, such incredible. I mean, you really were going through something pretty like a crisis. The body was really like screaming out to kind of stop what they were doing and changing pace. How
Yeah.
did you heal yourself? For those that are right now in a place where they feel stuck and they don't know how to move forward, what do you suggest that they do in order to move out of that space? How did you choose yourself, I guess, in that moment as well? Go ahead.
That's a beautiful way to ask it, Geraldine. How did you choose yourself? Um, the first moment that I remember was really pivotal, and I just was so grateful that my spirit, God, whatever, enabled me to feel this as it happened. But I was in the doctor's office. This was at the very beginning of the 2 years. I knew I had a tumor already, and I had been told it was pretty large. And then the doctor informed me in this meeting that based on where it was in my body, it was definitely cancer. The only thing they didn't know was how advanced it was, how fast growing it was, had it spread. They could see on through an MRI that there was definitely a pretty large tumor, but that's all they knew for sure. And so, of course, there it was. There was the C word right there, right in the middle of the meeting. And there was something, I have to give a lot of credit to my doctor, Dr. Rosen in Santa Cruz, California, because he had a way of talking with me that while he wasn't diminishing this, it was cancer. There was no way around it. And it was a large tumor, and there was no way around that either. But he had a way of just giving me confidence that there was a plan he had, and I had to have surgery. There was no alternative. Well, some people would say I should have done something totally self-healing and not gone the surgery route. In that moment, I've had no doubt that surgery was the right thing to do for me. And I think I'm one person who totally embraces integrative things and have been for 50 years. This is not new for me at all. I became a vegetarian at 19 when housewives in America were boycotting beef because it was too expensive. And I said, I'm going to support the housewives and boycott beef too. And while I'm at it, I think I'll just like stop doing all eating of flesh. So I became a vegetarian and then decided, well, I'll do it for reasons other than for boycotting beef. I want to like check into this. And it seemed to make a lot of sense, which in those days, you started reading anything on vegetarianism, it led into spiritual stuff because you got into Hindu and yoga stuff. It just was too intertwined. So that all that was opening up at the same time. But I think I've always had this a desire to embrace what's new and untested, but I've wanted to know the validation for it, if there is any, because my mind that part of me is real. I love having the validation. I'm a New Yorker in that way. I'm skeptical of claims that are made for anything, and I tend to be more trusting of science if it's really well done science. But that doesn't mean I'm not open to things that aren't science. I am extremely open to things that aren't science, or I wouldn't have done all those chapters that what I just shared with you. So I think in that moment when I was told this was cancer, and he was telling me we'll do surgery, we'll make sure it's not an aggressive advanced stage, which luckily it was not. It was stage 1 and it had not spread. And then they put me on this immunotherapy, and I felt very trusting that that process is what I needed. It was not as extreme as it could have been. I wasn't being told you had to be on radiation and chemo or anything like that. Immunotherapy is milder, but still, it was all that I needed, according to my doctor. But meanwhile, I was meditating. Meanwhile, I was doing lots of self-reflection. Meanwhile, I was, while I could, doing yoga and doing things and being outdoors and just doing lots of time, taking time off internally for myself to try to make sure I was as balanced as I could be. And somewhere in there is when I realized that one of my strongest um, instincts, really, but also, I guess, traits, and this especially is from my mother, was the spirit of playfulness. That as dark as the process was in many ways, and then of course with the passing of my mother made all the darker in some ways. There was still this kind of irrepressible, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. That was in me, and not every day, not at all. I mean, believe me, there were many, many, many very troubling, very dark, very worrying times. I'll never forget because I had been contracting these staph infections, and then the doctor called me one day and he said, "Okay, I got to do one call to verify, but it looks like the staph is spread to your blood, so you need to go to the hospital." And I knew what that meant. Staph in your blood is life-threatening. Let's go to the hospital now. Let's don't mess around. And so I was very soberly okay, like right now. He said, I'll call you back, and then it will be right now. And it was right now. Went down, had to deal with all that. But it was that was a harrowing time. But in the process of dealing with the staff, I had to use a drip of a very strong antibiotic, and it took 6 hours a day, hooked up to a bag, 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours at night, and this lasted for 6 weeks. And I should say, people going through chemo way worse than what I had to deal with. And yet, I was still dealing with this life-threatening infection. It didn't feel terrible to me, so I had that going for me. But I was still having to do all this. But at some point, after a couple of weeks, where basically I had to really restrict my exercise for a variety of reasons during this time, I was really not allowed to exercise. I tried just going down the steps one day, as I normally would do, and both of my thighs were shaking, just walking downstairs. And I thought, now I'm an 85-year-old man on top of everything else. This is so not okay. This is so not okay that my hips cannot even support me walking downstairs. This is worse than the cancer. Losing my mobility, that's so not okay. Now, my hips were already a problem. They'd been arthritic for some years, but now they were suddenly getting way worse while all this other stuff's going on. It's like, damn, wow.
Yeah.
Got through it. So there was enough, I used to call it rubber in me, resilient, bounce back in me. And this is where I give a tremendous credit to the years with HeartMath and all the study and the practice and the teaching of the HeartMath tools. Because throughout that 2 years, many a time I would come out of a surgery or a treatment or something. And sometimes it was a doctor or a nurse, and when they would give you positive feedback, usually you kind of like, well, they want to say that to make you feel good. When it's a friend and they're saying something like, "Wow, you're looking so much better than I was expecting," and I hear that phrase a lot. You're looking so much better than I was expecting. Like, how bad did you think I was going to look? Because I just had freaking bladder cancer, man. But I kept hearing these positives, like, "Man, you look like you're okay." I said, "Yeah, I'm going to be okay." But it was the surprise in people, and the fact that I kept hearing that, I thought, I do have resilience with all this that's happening all at the same time. And then my mother, um, I do have resilience. Now, how did I build the resilience? Part of it was just my nature, but a lot of it was HeartMath. A lot of it was practicing these tools for rebalancing my emotions every day, multiple times a day for 20 years. No question that was an incredible source of power that my body naturally could tap into. So the healing was faster than expected in nearly every case. And the recovery was faster. I didn't look as bad as people were expecting because, wow, that should have really wiped you out and you're looking a little too chipper right now. Are you sure you really went in the hospital? Are you sure you're not vacationing in Maui?
Yeah, Bruce, that brings up a really good point, and I wanted to mention this, that originally we had Joe Delaney scheduled for this day, and you graciously switched with him because he had a heart incident. And it's very common when people like yourself that teach HeartMath, and Joe Delaney has taught and dealt with heart coherence for 35 years. And people, even in our industry, in the health and wellness industry, will target you and say, well, okay, you're Mr. HeartMath, and Joe Delaney is Mr. Heart Coherence. He speaks it all the time. How is it that you can preach one thing and then your body shuts down in another? And what I was saying to Joe to support him is reframing it is that, well, it would have been much, much worse if he hadn't been practicing heart coherence for so long. And you touched on that. So I just really wanted to solidify that point, is that, and I know you from conversations we had, you had people talk to you about, well, how could you be sick when you're Mr. Heart Math, um, when you speak in coherence all the time and teach it all the time? And so I know you had to face that a little bit. And for Joe, who I know is listening and it's going to be on a show, I just want you to give some support to that, we are all human and we all can come down with illness. And I just want could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, because I think many people that are drawn to holistic practices, spiritual practices, integrated practices of any kind, there's this sort of unspoken belief that if I will only do that, then I'll be forever free of all illness, all problems, that's the panacea. And anybody who's been in it for years recognizes, thank God I have these tools. But it doesn't mean life is never going to throw a situation in your path that could test you. That would be very idealistic and disconnected from life to assume such a thing. Name a saint. Go ahead and name a saint that wasn't incredibly tested at some point in their life. Probably after they got on the path. Well after. And probably multiple times tested. Who was that first guy? Jesus. Yeah, it seems like he might have had a temptation or two after he got on the path, right? And probably all kinds of bad stuff that happened to him that didn't make the final cut into the edits for the New Testament, right? We're seeing books about that life, which were edited several hundred years after to fit with what the church believed at the time. Who knows what he actually went through? It's probably much more, lurid or whatever. Who knows, right? But I guess the real point is that, um, well, a couple of points. One is that, I believe that we in the West, probably not just in the West, but especially in the West, because that's what I know more so than other parts of the world, are too linear when it comes to disease. And this is where I have a problem with mainstream science from time to time, because it can be so much about, um, identifying a single cause for the disease and assuming, well, as soon as if we get to treat the cause, then you'll not have the disease again. Or if we fix that problem, that'll do it. But in my understanding of just my own spiritual life and the nature of life itself, there's so many intersecting factors that lead us to why we get sick. It's not as linear as just a single factor. That cancer, oh, well, what were the carcinogens that you must have been exposed to? Why did you get cancer? Well, on the linear level, there were things that I was exposed to. Yes. Why didn't other people get cancer? That's a question you'll never be able to answer. Because why did everybody not get COVID? We've all been exposed to it. Because some people had stronger immune systems than others. Why is that? Well, a whole bunch of reasons why. There isn't a single reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think in my experience, the more you dig into why are we healthy, why are we not, why do things happen at certain times, I have a very firm belief that significant events in our life that happen, whether that's on the level of health, very significant relationships that are turning points in our life, those were kind of part of the plan. I don't mean God just kind of decides for us, but my soul, that to go through those things in my own soul's growth in this life were essential. Up to that point, many times I felt people couldn't fully relate to me because my story before getting sick was kind of like, damn, did anything bad ever happen to you? You grow up with these amazing parents, 5 sons, you never fought, you all kind of love each other, still love each other. You are handed a role in the longest running musical in the world. You're handed an opportunity to be part of HeartMath. Did anything bad ever happen to you? And I'd say I broke my ankle in ninth grade. I mean, like, sorry, no. What can I tell you? I mean, not really, not compared to most people. And then I went through all that I went through in 2 years, and suddenly people are like, oh my God, how did you manage that? I can't imagine even doing half of that, let alone all of that in 2 years. And I found that there was a level of compassion that developed in me for what other people go through in life that I had never experienced. I had never had serious illness, let alone complex illnesses at the same time. I was dealing with three things at the same time: failing hips, staph in my blood, and cancer. Now, for some people right now, what I was dealing with is like child's play compared to what they're dealing with right now. But for me, this was like, welcome to the world of tragedy. We're going to just lay it all on you at one time, just kind of deal with it all at once. So I know on the inner levels how much my heart grew during all of that, how much I had to learn surrender, how much I was able to learn compassion for what it's really like when you are waiting for the doctor to give you the word about the test. After we had the surgery for cancer and I'd been in treatment for a few months, and I was having the first test, it was like 3 months afterwards. And the doctor was confident. He was like, I'd gone through everything great and I was like really healthy, and he was really sure it was all going to be fine. But it was the first test. And I was like consciously saying, I'm fine. I'm sure this is fine. I don't sense anything else is going on. And then when I got the voicemail message from him, and he said the test came back negative, negative never sounded so good as that moment. And I had this tremendous relief. I didn't realize how much I was carrying of that until that moment. So I've had that experience time and time again. And I can relate to what people go through in ways I just couldn't before. And there was so much that unfolded for me in opening my heart in compassion for others, let alone acknowledging. I mean, people hear that and say, damn, you're a courageous dude. And I'm thinking, I was just going through what I was going through. And then I give myself some credit and say, damn, you were a courageous dude to get through all that and to have life again and be excited again, and more so actually than ever. So I don't even remember what your question was, Jeff, but you just heard what you heard.
Yeah, no, that was beautiful, Bruce, and I appreciate that. And you really speak to. I was going a little different direction, but I want to talk about what you had responded to, because most people don't find the depth of their empathy until they have taken a hit. It's like
Yeah,
kids who have been abused. You either grow up to be an abuser or you would grow up to be someone who would never abuse. And people who have been hurt with early life trauma end up being an empath, and they often, the brain doesn't know the difference between a story and a real event. So when people you care about have trauma to them, you take that in and you hold it as your own. And it really is. And I didn't go through what my son went through, but being right there witnessing it with them gave me that perception of it. So to turn just a little bit, you talked about, like the soul's journey and having a soul contract and fulfilling something that had a life that has trauma in it, so that you can live the role that you have. And much like my awakening through my son, I would have never been sitting here talking to you, wouldn't have met you, wouldn't be with
exactly.
Geraldine doing what we're doing, helping the world the way we are, if we hadn't taken that hit. So on the other side of it, there's something I want to read short. One of our future guests, Stephen Hall, wrote a book called The 7 Tools of Healing. And this doesn't say this in the book. I've extrapolated from it, and I think I've read it to you before. But it goes like this: at the core of every human being, there is a divine wisdom that knows who you really are, what your soul prefers. This deep knowing from the soul speaks through the heart to the gut, brain, and mind body. Allowing the ego or social environmental influences to lead you away from this divine wisdom is the root cause of all disease and manifests in the body as symptoms. Healing, then, is the process of finding out who you really are and then living true to yourself. And if you could reflect back on your heart math days, and by no means am I dissing heart math at all. I use their technology and teachings every single time I'm with a care recipient. But when you are not living to your soul's design, you're not listening to the intelligence of your heart, it takes you away from health and wellness. And then how did you then return? I mean,
Well, I want to reframe it a little bit, because I was absolutely supposed to spend all those years with HeartMath. That was absolutely
Absolutely.
my soul's journey. It wasn't like I had made a mistake and like, oh my God, what am I doing? I got to get out of here. It was not at all. I wouldn't. I'm 10 years later. I'm still teaching it at Stanford, and I coach people, athletes, and professionals, and others. Um, so it was absolutely what I was supposed to do. What I wasn't prepared for was that it wasn't the only thing I was supposed to do, because when I got in to it, as did all of us at the beginning, this was a lifetime commitment.
Exactly.
But as everybody in the audience right now who is no longer married has had to face at some point, well, that thing we thought we were committed to forever, life changed. Life changed, and it isn't a bad thing that that the change of life revealed some new path. It doesn't mean all divorces are without blame or unfortunate circumstance, but um, I've come to the awareness that um, it was going to take something dramatic for the next phase of my life to happen. Because I think a lot of people would have said, why would you ever? I mean, that was like an amazing organization to be part of, and you had a very influential role, CEO and of the for-profit side and all that. Why would you ever not want to just stay with that? Well, some stuff had happened to me, and it lasted a while, 2 years, and I had a lot of time to think and explore because I was kind of unplugged in certain ways, even though I was still CEO and I was still traveling 100,000 miles per year during those 2 years, which is crazy when I look back at it. But yeah, I was, because that was my role and that was my identity, and that was I had a lot of fulfillment out of that too. It's not like it was not a joy. But when I looked to the future, it was clearly I needed to move in another direction and awaken a new part of me, an old part of me that had that I kind of let go on cruise control or something. And I guess again, I just feel like yes, I was ignoring some signals, but it was kind of wasn't the time to acknowledge them either earlier. So yeah, I'd had some feelings for a while that it's no fun that we don't have the band anymore. Or but no, but it wasn't anybody's fault. There's nobody to blame that the HeartMath didn't still have a band, but that had gone away, but I missed it. But I just kind of, well, it's okay. I still get to hike and it's gorgeous in Santa Cruz Mountains and all this great stuff. But I was not kind of willing to look, because if I looked too deep at the missing, that would have been like, wait a minute, that's just too hard. How do I integrate that with this life that's very much about HeartMath and so much of it absorbed in that? So I think it was a hard thing to even consider for a while, and it wasn't until I was sort of flat on my back for long periods of time, occasionally enjoying an opiate or two based on the surgery I just had. Um, but it was the time for my soul to really reflect. To me, it was it was the soul's time to kind of step back and really look and begin to feel into what would it be like to go into the next phase. Now a new phase happens. It's kind of like, oh, I'm in the next phase now. Okay, like it's not as wrenching as it was then. I've gone through several since I left HeartMath. Now it's sort of like, oh yeah, you're supposed to. Another one. It's time. It happened in the streets of Manhattan a couple years ago. Am I in another reinvention now? It was like, yeah, okay, okay. Now I'm a college president, as you heard, and and that's shifting. so so I think there's a fundamental lesson here about that you're picking up on, that we need to really pay attention to the signals, but also not to beat ourselves if we feel like, God, I waited so long. No, you waited the right amount of time, because until that time happened, and either it was an accident or something, you got fired or something, until that moment happened, it wasn't clear enough to you, so you couldn't act. So that's why these situations sometimes have to emerge to make it really clear. Okay, now I have to do
Yeah.
this next thing.
Yeah, no, that's exactly to my point, Bruce. And I appreciate that, because what is balance in one part of our life can be unbalanced in another part of our life. We're made to move on and get past these plateaus. and you finding balance. I mean, that's what created you as a Renaissance human, is to continue to seek your new balance. And it's led you down a beautiful path from, and your position at HeartMath was a dream career and dream job, and it would have been really hard to
Absolutely.
leave. I totally get that.
Absolutely.
But it took, it's like everything in the universe is looking for homeostasis. Our autonomic nervous system, the universe itself, differentials in air pressure create wind, differential in temperature create tornadoes. And when we're out of balance, the universe, God, has a way of bringing us back in balance. And that's like the challenges that you talked about for any saint, any person that's evolving, continuing to evolve. You're going to go through challenges. So
Right.
you're a real testament to that resilience of being a Renaissance human, rediscovering yourself, and then finding your new balance. So that was exactly my point.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
actually
Thank you.
saw a couple interviews where you discussed, how holistic health is something that sometimes we want to just push away and maybe not, pay attention to. But in fact, the whole idea of having a holistic living, a holistic health in how we're managing our everyday lives. What are some of the things or tools? You mentioned something about breathing and some techniques that you utilized. What are some techniques that have helped you the most in this journey of healing and also in your everyday life now in order to have a successful and healthy life?
Breathing is definitely a good thing. I recommend it to all people all the time. I'm being tongue in cheek because obviously you're going to breathe anyway. But yeah, at the core of the heart math techniques actually is regulating our breath. And we understood early on from our research that regulating one's breathing starts to bring the body into homeostasis. It starts to balance out the fundamental system, the autonomic nervous system, which they're, the two branches, sympathetic side, which raises heart rate, the parasympathetic, which is the relaxation response, and just regulating your breath tends to bring those two systems into balance. They become like a seesaw. One's up while the other's down, and then the other's up while the other one's down. And so there's this nice flow that happens internally, and just the breath can begin to get us there. Just regulating our breath, just saying, I'm going to breathe in for 5 seconds, and then I'm going to breathe out for 5 seconds, or you could even do 4 seconds, just regulating the breath at any point. Part of the beauty of what's now very fashionably called breath work. I love that it's become such a thing. Did you do your breath work today? You mean, did I breathe? Yeah, I breathed this morning. Pretty sure all night too. Not 100%. I might have stopped at some point, but pretty sure I've been breathing the whole way through. But my point really, that part of the beauty of, and even the simplicity of what I just said, is that just the regulating of the breath for 4 or 5 seconds as you inhale and 4 or 5 seconds as you exhale, that creates such a balance, and you can do that at any point. Right now, while you're asking the next question, I'm liable to be doing that. Later on today, you could be in traffic, Geraldine, and you could try it while you're driving, because I'm not saying close your eyes. I'm just saying regulate your breath. Just slow it down, but keep it going. Don't stop. Don't like just completely stop. Just nice, gentle, continuous, even breathing. Many people have kind of discovered that even intuitively. If you ever watch athletes, nearly all of them, as they get up to bat for baseball, or coming up to the starting line for a race or tennis, they go, at some point you'll see them go. Everybody does that. Did somebody teach them to do that? Probably not. There's just some intuitive knowing that I've got to use my breath to kind of let go of junk that's accumulated in me based on fear, anxiety, whatever, about that thing I'm about to do. That's high stakes. I'm an athlete, right? So we intuitively have this mechanism to go, let it all go. So that's another one too. There's the great technique of just breathing in, and then as you release, just like just letting it go, but like a shrug, letting go, like letting go, as opposed to forcing it out. That's a different technique. But the one I'm referring to now is breathing in, like inhaling in through the nose, and then as you exhale, it's like just letting go, not pushing out, but just releasing. because I found that extremely important and effective because I think many of us have no idea how much tension we're actually carrying in our body until we get so quiet or so still in bed or on a massage table or in a chair that we suddenly realize, oh my God, there's tension in my lower back, there's tension in my shoulders. I've got a buzz throughout my body from the intensity of today. You know, this is what's actually going on. There's all this energy being spent kind of maintaining this noise, internal noise, physiological noise in my body. So breath is super important. So I would definitely highly encourage both of those things that I just mentioned, both of those breath techniques. And I introduced the breath in terms of heart math because pretty much every heart math technique does involve regulating your breathing. But what heart math also learned was it's much more than breathing. If breathing alone was enough, we would have probably figured that out by now, and everybody be just breathing more. But it takes more than that to really and change not only physiology, but allow us to grow. So the breath on itself can reset the system quickly, can help with all kinds of things related to trauma, pain, anxiety, etc. The repatterning to get ourselves into a new state that's looking forward to the future and more strong and more confident, that comes with learning how to regulate our emotions, not just the breath. And so one of HeartMath's greatest contributions was establishing beyond any shadow of a doubt that the power of positive emotions to transform our physiology, our psychology, our connection to our spirit, our ability to connect well with others and to love others is profound. And unfortunately, in this age, and I think this has been made worse by COVID, it's harder than ever to get in touch with positive emotions for many people. Like when you say focus on a positive feeling, I haven't had one in 2 years, some people would say. Focus on a positive feeling. The last positive feeling was my dad. He just died last month. You know, so trying to focus on a positive feeling leads to a sad feeling for a lot of people. So this is not easy. And part of this is also because of this disconnectedness that's also gotten amplified by COVID, and the polarization that's gotten amplified by COVID. I'm not blaming COVID for all the evils of the world. COVID is the illuminator in some ways of what's going wrong. And damn, we so disconnected to nature, to each other, to life, to hugging. We got to kind of keep some of that in mind in order for us to be whole and to feel whole. So, to me, I've taken this sort of very common sense approach about certain things that I got to breathe every day. I'm pretty sure that's a necessity. Like really sure that's a necessity. Why not breathe in as conscious a way as I can? I have to go through life every day. Why not enjoy life as consciously and richly as I can? Which means, and Jeff, you'd appreciate this as a Dr. Joe Dispenza fan, that it was 2 days ago I was going outside to do a walking meditation of Dr. Joe's. I love those meditations. Joe is a dear friend. I feel the connection to him so much when I do that. I step outside. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning. The angle of the sun coming through the golden trees. I like stopped within 30 seconds. I thought, this is not a walking meditation. This is a photo op. I think the entire walk is now going to be me stopping from time to time. Oh my God, look at that! I have to stop it. Just shoot that. You saw some of the pictures on the Creativity Unleashed page today. Those are some from my walking meditation, which was actually walking and stopping meditation because of the beauty. But my point of bringing up the story was you have to be willing to embrace the moment. And even though my mind was, I'm doing this walking meditation now, I got to stay on that. The moment was unbelievably spectacular and glorious. Why would I ignore that?
Yeah,
That moment will never happen again. I can do Joe's meditation any time of the day, any day of the week. That moment will never happen again. Why not just allow myself to surrender into that? Because we are one whole system. So that part of me that wants to do that, why wouldn't I honor that?
yeah, and it's the point of the Dr. Joe walking meditations is to get to the moment so you will appreciate that, and you're already there. You're 5-10 minutes into the walk, and you're already finding beauty in everything. And that's the right brain of divinity connecting us to everything. And like you said, the most beautiful part about heart math is the science behind the expansion of your heart by choosing positive emotions and using your breath to get to the point where you can expand that toroidal field of your heart. And that's what connects us with nature and with other people. So that's the whole point of the walk. So you're there.
Absolutely. And back to your question, another angle to respond, Geraldine, about the holistic health and holistic system, that concept. It suddenly occurred to me recently that I have a very simple way to explain how we are one whole system, we as individuals, let alone as a family, let alone as a community, but just thinking of ourselves for a moment. So when I was in that doctor's office and he said the word cancer, if we were not whole systems, then only my body would have responded to that word, or only my mind would have responded to that word, or maybe my emotions would have responded to that word, or maybe my spirit would have responded to that word. But all of those responded to that word because we are so connected. My body was like, what's going on? What's going to happen? My mind was projecting into the future. My emotions were like, my emotions were actually interesting because there was a strange peace may be even too strong a word, a strange peace, I'll use it anyway, in knowing ahead of time it was cancer. A lot of times before surgeries like that, you don't know until they go in. But in this case, because of where it was in my body, it could only be cancer. So it was like a strange comfort. So it's like, okay, we got that out of the way. We at least know that. And, and I made a choice in that doctor's office that day, and the doctor was kind of surprised by it. But he knew already a little bit about heart math. He had actually Googled me before I came in for the appointment, and he found out about heart math. Found out I spoke in different places around the world, and at one point he's telling me the whole path of what the surgery and what we're gonna do. And at one point I said, "Doctor, one thing is for sure, I will have a story to tell." And he said, "That's a very positive attitude to have." And he kind of smiled at me, very genuinely smiling, like, "Wow, good for you." And I was saying that because I said, "Look, I'm out speaking all the time, so I will have a story to tell in hopes that could help others. Whatever happens, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm new to this. I'm new to this cancer thing." And but I said to him, "I'm very clear right now that I'm at a fork in the road, and the cancer word." There's multiple forks, multiple tines of that fork, lots of directions you can go with that. And I said, I am going to do my best to stay on the positive side and try to make something out of this, partly so I can share with others, not just for that, for me, but also to be able to help others who are going to have to go through similar situations. But that was, again, it was partly, we're all one system. I have to honor all of me in this process. I have to marshal all of me to get through this. This isn't just, yes, there's something that's causing my body to produce this bad thing in me that's not helping me, could make life even worse for me. But I need to not just approach it as it's a war now, or like this is happening. How do I somehow make the most of this? And still being very soberly in the real world that you're dealing with cancer, dude.
Yeah, that is so powerful. I love that you talk about us being this, system. We're very much interconnected with many things. And one of the things that I discover in the work that I do, is that a lot of times we may not realize the patterns of emotions that we're suppressing in our everyday life. And it isn't
Right.
until something like this creates such pressure that highlights all of that stuff that we're suppressing. And now it gives you an opportunity to dive deep into those emotions and to kind of organize and figure out where we are in those. And I think that your story really speaks to that because you went through these transformations, so many different things that you've done. You achieved so many incredible things in your life. It really is amazing, the story that you lived. You are now working in a university. I know that you teach at Stanford as well, but you're, I believe you're CEO, or please correct me, of an institute now. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah,
How did you get into that?
absolutely. A phone call uh, told me about this school. It's a marvelous school called the Graduate Institute for Holistic Studies. It's a small nonprofit accredited graduate school. You can get a master's degree in integrative health and healing from us. You can get a master's degree in something called learning and thinking. You can get a master's degree in something called consciousness studies and transpersonal psychology. We have a coaching program called Coaching with Spirit. We're developing a new integrative health coaching as well. So all the work that we do is from different angles, applying this idea that we are all whole systems. We are made up of all the parts, and to believe that we're only one of the parts. One of the parts may be screaming at a certain time, and so all we can feel is the emotion at a certain time, or all we can feel is the spiritual dilemma we're in, but in fact we're all of it all the time. Just like a chord, that certain notes can be louder of a chord, but it's all one thing. You just can't get around that. Try. Prove to me that you're not. What are you going to use to prove to me that you're not all those things? So this is a school. It's been around for a little over 20 years, and it's an interesting time for us because on the one hand, COVID has been hard on higher education. A lot of people deciding not to do certain learning that they had done because it's not relevant enough to life today. And on the other hand, many people are also more aware of the holistic nature of life than ever before. I mean, the most interconnected event in human history, and we're all conscious of it, is COVID. When has the entire human race all been aware we were all going through the same thing at the same time? Asteroids may have hit planet Earth, and all the cavemen and women all got affected by it, but they didn't know that people on all of these other. Now we're so interconnected. The economies of every, I've talked to friends in China, in India, in the UK. Their business is all affected by COVID, just like ours. There's no real difference. So this has been the illuminator of just how holistic humanity is, and how we have to recognize that our actions have an effect beyond just ourselves. So that's what the school is about. And so we believe there's actually a big opportunity for more people to embrace these ideas now than ever, because their own spirit's been shaken by these last 2 years, and so they've had to look at things they didn't have to look at before, because that's what happens. It happened to me. It happens to everybody. A crisis hits. You can't help but reflect on certain aspects, regrets, sadness, longings. That's what happens. It's good. It's a good part of any tragedy in a way. And so that's happened on a mass scale and still happening, right? So the opportunity to offer ways of looking at life that integrate these different aspects of ourselves and honor these different aspects of ourselves in a way that is sustainable and practical is what we're all about. And I learned about this place almost exactly 2 years ago, and was offered the role of president, and was appointed president in June of 2020. And it's been quite an interesting ride. It's been quite an interesting ride, especially now. We've been online the entire time of COVID. We never were online at all until COVID, and now that's all we are. And we all work from home. We still don't use our office. And so I've been navigating, coming into an organization that's been around for 20 years, and we're completely online. Wouldn't be my first choice. I can't believe, I feel like I've already hugged you, Jeff, because we've had so many conversations, and you're such a warm-hearted, beautiful man. And yet we haven't. I'm a hugger, Geraldine. In case you hadn't figured that out, I'm a
Yeah,
total hugger.
me too. It's
And I know you are.
deprivation. It is
I can
total
feel it.
deprivation. Yeah, McCoy
Serious
and I
deprivation.
we came up with a saying during his journey that nothing heightens appreciation as much as deprivation. So none of us have hugged. I've never
Yeah.
even got to meet Geraldine, and here we're partnering.
Yeah.
So, I just want to touch on what you said about the Graduate Institute, because your point about hearing the word cancer, you didn't respond to it just with your heart or just with your mind. We're not fractals, we're not fractured. We are holistic people. And we are being treated by a medical system of speciality. and it doesn't include consciousness and spirit. It is separate from the cart forward. It has been separated from our practice, but the Graduate Institute, you include the word consciousness in some of your courses, and it's holistic. So you're looking at a whole being with consciousness and spirit included, and finding wellness, where the medical industrial complex uses a scalpel or a drug to take care of external symptoms and not getting to the core. So that's a major difference. And I applaud you for taking that role, because there's so many other things you could be doing with your time, but it's what you believe in is what we need as humanity to move forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an interesting challenge. It's great.
Amazing. Bruce, what are you working on, and where can we find you? Where can we connect with you?
Well, I'm here at my desk here in Connecticut. Yeah, what I'm working on now, well, the Graduate Institute is really my main focus. I do this work around creativity. Stanford back in 2017 asked me to create a course on creativity for Stanford, and I've been teaching it there ever since. And I kind of continue to iterate it. I continue to kind of let it grow. It feels like it's an entity that's supposed to keep growing, right? Because that's sort of my philosophy. So the course needs to keep growing. It's not going to be static. So I'm in the middle of teaching a master class on it, actually, and I love this so much. I don't get to do it that much anymore because of the responsibility with the Graduate Institute, but the chance to still contribute in that way and assist in the unfolding of someone's creativity I feel it's a tremendous privilege to get to do that. And it's a joy for me. Every time I see somebody, as I'm seeing now, every week when we meet, just the light bulbs going off in people, and like wow, like I'm really good. Like, you really liked that art project I did? Really? Are you? No, it wasn't that good. And I said, no, okay, Terry, listen to me. Listen to me. I do not dole out compliments frivolously. I would not do that. I'm not that guy. I'm not the cheerleader. Yeah, you're a fantastic artist. No, she's not. No, she's not. I'm saying it because I see something magical in you. You have an incredible gift. And please hear me. Class, am I wrong? Every hand in the class went up. This happened yesterday. So to be in that position to affirm to people who have felt like they weren't creative, felt like that urge to participate in life and create was not honorable or was not in them. Their sister had it, their brother had it, but not them. To feel that, to come awake again, it feels like I'm the doula. I never said this before. I feel like the doula of the birth of their own creativity. That's so interesting. This
That's a
is
good one.
something about being in the creative zone all the time. Is I continually surprise myself with things that I say. I just spontaneously feel like the doula. Never have I thought that before. So the creative energy is in us. It's alive in us. And I'm just saying, hello, guys. It really exists. It's really in there. So come on with me. Let's have a party. So I'm very passionate about that. I'm going to be actually bringing that in more into the Graduate Institute, that work. Um, Tuesday night, I'm performing in New York City. The following Tuesday night, I'm performing in New York City. I'm part of this marvelous little event that happens a few times a month called Peaceable Hour.
Wow.
And it's 1 hour of lovely music performed by classically trained musicians. I'm the male singer. There's two female singers and a wonderful pianist. We perform it in a little chapel of a church, which is also a theater in Midtown Manhattan,
Mhm.
in the Broadway area of Manhattan. And it's 5 people might be there. It's a very small chapel. And I get to sing. And I am so fulfilled every time. It doesn't matter if there's 2 people there because I'm getting to sing. And it's beautiful and it's so fulfilling and so rich. So I'm involved with lots of little things and big things. And it's a very rich life. So,
Wow,
and what a
beautiful.
joy it is to be here and to meet you, Geraldine. And you have a lovely presence and just depth of your soul. And the big guy here, he's my brother. And I so love getting a chance to talk to you as well, Jeff.
Always,
Thank you.
Bruce. Always a joy. Love you so much.
Yeah,
Back at you.
It's been such an honor to have you, Bruce, with us to share your wisdom and your journey. And we really hope to connect with you again soon to learn more about what you're working and what you're going to be co-creating in the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. And Jeff, any closing final words?
No, I just really look forward to the path we're on, Bruce and Geraldine, and we'll be doing more in the future. This is the seed being planted. Will bear fruit later.
Well, and I'm super excited about the roundtable idea about your son and that whole journey that has so moved me to learn about from you. And I think that's it's a remarkable story, and eager to help get that
Yeah.
out.
Well, I really appreciate you for that. You're a big catalyst for making it happen. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Mhm.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Bruce. And next week we have Scarlett Lewis. We're going to be discussing choosing love. So we will be here next
Mm.
Friday. And we look forward. Please have an incredible week, and we will see you soon. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Thank you,
Take
Bruce. Thank
care.
you, Geraldine.
My pleasure.
Bye.